Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the
Pledge
flag
allegiance to
of
the
the United States of
United States of America, and to the republic and one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 4th Street in the city of Wausau at 7 p.m. on August 18th, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. And I would like to request everyone silence their cell phones and put them on silent or vibrate as to not be an interruption to the meeting. And I thank you for your compliance. And we will move into roll call, and everyone is requested to please sign in. If you have the ability to utilize the open meetings, I would encourage everyone to utilize it. And I would like to move on to item number 6, and that's welcome the visitors that we have with us this evening, and thank them for their interest. And we will move on to item number 7, and that is 15-minute public comment. I've had no one approach myself, and the clerk has had no one, so we will move on to item number 8, education presentation annual reports. Department head reports on roles and responsibilities, and we will start with the first, and that is item number 8A1, and that is CCIT, and we have the CCIT director, Jerry Klein, with us, and he will have a presentation on the roles and responsibilities. Jerry, if you would, please.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Klein. I'm the director of the City County IT Commission. I think I've met many of you before, but some of you are newer faces recently. So they've been asking all of us to, each of the department heads to come up, talk a little bit about our organization. The City County IT Commission is the group that I am representing tonight. I'm the director of it. A little overview on it. We support, we're owned by the city, the county, you folks, and North Central Healthcare. And we lease space on the top of City Hall, the 3rd floor, and we've been there for quite a while. We are, if you're familiar with some of the statutes, we're organized as under the 660301 statute, which is Wisconsin statute that allows municipalities and government entities to join together and make other entities. There's a couple of different 660301s around, and this one has been around since 1974. It's had this is I'm not going to go into this in detail, but there's a little history on it. It was done originally with the city and the county. There was a period where they joined with the Tech College, North Central Healthcare. The group ended up doing payroll processing for a couple of other counties for a period of time. And then the most recent changes is in 2008. North Central Healthcare had been off on their own doing their own IT services for a while. We brought back them into the group and renamed it to City County IT Commission in 2008. The reason that I think this is really an important organization is we have a lot of specialized services that are super expensive. IT people are not cheap. And this is an opportunity for the city and the county and North Central to share resources, provide 24/7 coverage, and then have specialists. We have specialists that are application developers, network engineers, cybersecurity specialists, project managers, and we share all those resources across all of our customer base. Look at the slide. And then we also share a lot of hardware in our network environment. And this is, I'm not going to go into it in any detail tonight because you guys have a big agenda. But in essence, we provide the infrastructure that everybody uses. And on that infrastructure, we provide the cybersecurity platform for it. And all of our customers own and share the resources of that. When we have to buy something, we put it in our operating budget and it gets distributed. If I had more time, I'd explain our chargeback model, which is fairly complicated. Lance loves it. But in essence, what we do is we figure out how much time we spend for each of our customers and then try to, as best we can, fairly charge back our cost of services. And so in there, we provide kind of the network backbone that we have. We also participate with the Tech College and the school district, and we own the Wausau Community Area Network fiber plant, which was put in with grant money and seed money from the city, the county, and the Wausau School District, and we built that 12 years ago. That's 11 miles of fiber that connects us to it's kind of a big U-shape or it's basically a Z around this city, but in the process of putting it in, we were able to swap fiber with other partners, and we connect to the State Patrol building in Rib Mountain with a 10 gigabit connection to our internet service provider. Prior to that, we had a 100 megabit connection that supported all of our customers. So we went from 100 megabit to a 10 gigabit connection. Huge increase. I don't have anybody ever call me anymore saying, I can't get to the internet, it's too slow to download files. And so the City County IT Commission, that's a big piece of what we do, and we provide the network engineering support for the CAN as well. And then on that property, we connect 26 other properties. So all of the county buildings on West Street are all on that fiber backbone. The UWMC is, the library, it connects to the loop that we have downtown. And then it also connects to Aspirus, Marshfield Clinic, and a number of the Wausau School District properties. So we support that as well. And then we get really involved in a lot of the security rules that apply to us. Captain Milhausen's in the back today, and Bill and I get involved in making sure that we pass our CJIS audit every few years. That's the Criminal Justice Information Audit. And then because we deal with medical information, we also have to support and be able to pass a HIPAA audit as well. So we have pretty stringent rules. And those rules apply to all of our customers, all of the employees, and it can be a little burdensome, but it's the most efficient way to provide security services for everybody. So all of the county employees' passwords change every 90 days. They have to have a complex password. And just as you guys experienced in January, everyone has to have multi-factor authentication in place. So we have that standard across all of our customer base, and that allows us to share the cost of building that kind of environment and supporting it. I think I already covered this. I just would also mention that we also support all the law enforcement agencies in the county, of which there are 11. We have all of the squad cars that are on the road, and I think I have it on the next slide. I think there's about 128 squad cars on the road and about 6 motorcycles. All of them have a laptop or tablet in them that connects directly to our dispatch center. That's a system called Central Square. It used to be called Superior. If you've been on the board, you may recall having us talk about that system. It's basically got 4 big modules. It has dispatch, the mobile software that the officers use in the car, the records management system that the detectives use to record and prepare for criminal charges to people, and then the jail system. And we recently were able to get an interface working that was very difficult, and we can now push that data into the district attorney's office so that they don't have to rekey all of that information when we bring people forward for charges. So that system is used by all of the law enforcement agencies in the county, and takes quite a bit to support. Kristen Sorensen is in the back in the corner. Wave. Kristen is our application analyst dedicated to just doing law enforcement application software. So she spends all day doing that, and that's what she's working on back there right now, actually. And then we also get involved in some of the adjunct organizations that you fund and own as well. Brian's here today. We have a connection to his facility at the airport because the county does the payroll for him. So his financial staff do all of their financial related and payroll related stuff on the system that's in the courthouse here. Same thing with the ADRC. We support about 70 departments, and there's around 2,000 employees that we use. In the middle of the summer, Jamie and her team back there hire dozens and dozens of seasonal workers. The highway does as well. And so we have a lot of people coming and going from our system all the time. Wesley in the back, he and his teams support our help desk, and they're the ones that add all of your accounts, change the passwords on them, and they're available to support them. So I mentioned earlier the slide I had about value proposition. Here's the next piece of it. So we have a number of systems that we share across everybody. And those are, these are some of the key ones. There's actually a list of about 35, I think, when I worked on it for another project a little while ago. Everybody's on the same email system. We moved everybody to Office 365 the end of last year. The city and the county are on the same financial system. You may recall, if you were on the board, we approved a huge project to move us from Kayenta, an ancient system, to a modern system called Workday. So we're in the middle of that project right now. I mentioned earlier that we support and share a law enforcement system across everybody. We share the same phone system across all of our customers. We manage all of the mobile devices, of which there are over 500 now, I think. And that allows us to, I'll pick on Lance. Lance's mobile phone has a mobile management piece that's on top of it. It allows us to keep track of that phone. We can encrypt the part of his phone that stores our data on it. And then if Lance loses it at bar, he can call us. He can call us in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, shut my phone down," and send a wipe to it. And that's the kind of stuff a management tool like that does. So it provides a lot of value to everybody. Provides security. We can sign audits that say, yeah, all of those systems are password protected. They have a password protected screensaver on them. They're encrypted. The communication we have to them, we know who's doing what across them. And then we support the election software, which none of us are big fans of right now, but the open meeting software that you guys use, we help Kim and the vendor support that. And then, of course, the ES&S vote system that you all voted on last Tuesday. My team helps support Kim and the vendor that work on that system as well. And I think, Kim, there's 74 of those machines out there, voting machines. There's 80 voting machines. And then security is a big part of our work. I'm not going to get into that today, but trying to keep the system secure and not having hackers put ransomware on it is a huge project for us. Here's a little picture of our staff. We have about 31 employees. They're basically kind of structured like most IT organizations. We have a help desk team, a PC team, network engineers and network administrators, a couple of analysts, a couple of programmers, 2 people that know database, have pretty good database skills, and then the management team over that is 4 managers, and then we have a finance manager and myself. Our governance model is I report to the board of directors. Our board of directors is made up of whoever's the mayor and the finance director for the city, whoever's the top elected and appointed positions at the county, the CEO and head of IT at North Central Healthcare, and then 1 member from the community, and that currently is Chet Streeb, who's the chief information officer at the technical college in town. And your portion of our operating budget this year is 47%. So our budget is about $6 million for 2023. We just went over this with Lance a few days ago. And we figure out how much time we spent at each of our customers. And so the 2023 budget is 47% of our income is going to come from the county as well. That kind of gives you a perspective. You're definitely a large customer of ours. And that's the end. It's hopefully on time. Close at least. Any questions?
Questions for Jerry?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. We will move on to our next presenter, and that happens to be the Highway Commissioner, James Griesbach, on infrastructure.
Warmed up. Mic's on.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman Gibb, for putting me after a person from IT who has a nice PowerPoint. I have nothing. Everybody drove here on the road. First off, I'm going to start about a little bit about myself. I've actually been with the department now for 32 years, a little over 32 years, a little over half of those as commissioner. I began commissioner in '06. When I began commissioner, I was about 6'3". They pounded me down. I've seen a lot of changes over the years since 1990. I actually was going through some of the old hearing books this afternoon preparing for this. In 1990, when I began, the county board approved their budget for $77,890 was the budget in 1990. So there's been a lot of changes over the years. The county roadway system is made up of 614 miles of county roads and 110 bridges in the county system. The county also maintains over 800 miles of state and federal highways and 170 bridges on their system. And we have oversight on all the municipal bridges, which is another 240 bridges. So we have oversight on all the bridges. We work with all 61 municipalities at some point, one another. So we do a lot of different work for a lot of different folks also. Running the show, we have 77 dedicated employees. We have 4 on the administrative side. We have 2 in the purchasing and stock room. We have 1 engineer. We have 7 mechanics, and the rest are the road supervisors and the road crew. Currently, we are short 1 mechanic and 7 crew members. And going into this winter, besides those, we have to train 6 new employees that never plowed a flake of snow. So we're hoping that winter doesn't hit us right out of the gun, so we have a little time for some training in there. Hiring, that's not for the highway department, for everybody within the county. It's been a real challenge, to say the least, so we're hoping to make some strides there. We have 5 shops around the county. We have 2 of them that we run year-round. We have one here in Wausau, and we have our Stratford shop, which actually has an Edgar address, but we call it the Stratford shop because I'm from Stratford, so we call that one the Stratford shop. And then we have a shop in Hatley, Mosinee, and Abbotsford. We run those roughly from about deer hunting till whenever winter decides to end, April, sometime in that same. Our budget, we consist of a lot of different fields of work in there. We have the state work. We have about $3.3 million of state work we do annually. We are the only state in the nation that does the state work on the state and federal system. If you go to Minnesota, Illinois, I don't care what state you pick, each one of those states has a state of, fill in the blank, Minnesota Department of Transportation, where they go out there and they plow all the state roads and all the federal roads. Again, we're the only state in the nation to have this unique partnership with the state of Wisconsin. When I do go out of state for some meetings and talk to national folks, we're kind of the envy of everybody. Everybody, all the states and the county want to know how they can do this and how they could get into it. So it's a unique partnership that we have with the state. I'm on the Wisconsin County Highway Association Executive Committee, so we sit down and meet with the state once a month, try at least once a month, once we miss a month in there. We talk about policy changes, what we could do, what are the county's goals, what's the state goals, what we could do to help one another. It's a really unique relationship. In my years at the department, I've seen it going from knocking heads that we don't want to talk to one another to putting arms around one another and saying, how can we accomplish this work together? So it's really been working out good with them. Besides the $3.3 million we do on a regular contract, we do other contracts with them during the year. We do traffic maintenance for them. We do local force accounts, LFAs. We do projects called PBMs, performance-based projects, where we act just like a contractor with them. We say, you want us to go out and crack fill this 1 mile road? This is what it's going to cost you. And at the end of the project, we hand them the bill and they pay us. All the other stuff is time and materials. We give them a detailed list of every truck, every can of paint, whatever we use, we give them. But these contracts, we do them. So we usually do around another $1 million a year with the state on these projects.
Go to your next slide. Just scroll.
Our shop, like I mentioned, we had those 7 mechanics out there. Our shop keeps over 500 pieces of equipment up and running. That's everything from a weed trimmer that we pick up at Charlie's Hardware to 1979 four-wheel drive Oshkosh four-wheel drive truck. Everything in between. Those mechanics have to know how to do diesel, regular gasoline engines, on dozers, plow trucks, graders, excavators, pavers, every piece of equipment that we have, this group of mechanics got to have the knowledge how to repair those. As far as equipment, every piece of equipment we have gets charged out. Even when we do a project ourselves, we charge ourselves. We're an enterprise fund. So when we do a project, we do a project for Jamie, we're going to do one for this fall in the Big Oak Plain Park. We're going to say, here's all of our guys, but here's our paver. You get so much charge per ton. Here's our trucks. Every piece of equipment gets charged out. That's how we put the tires on the truck. That's how we keep the lights on in the shop. That keeps all of our overhead. So when some departments have, I've always heard, well, you already own that piece of equipment. Why are you charging us for us? Because I got to maintain that vehicle. I got to keep lights on the truck. That's my shop overhead. So that's how we maintain our budget within our department. Every year we purchase $957,600 worth of equipment. I did mention that things have really changed since I have been commissioner in 2006 when I took over. Unfortunately, that's one thing that hasn't changed. I went back into records and checked that out. In 2006, we received about $911,000, and now we're getting $957,000. In 2012, I just went back and pulled one thing. It cost about $130,000 to set up a single axle truck for plowing. Now it costs us about $195,000 to set up one truck for plowing. A paver, in 2014, when we bought a paver, it was $344,000. We're going to be in the market for a paver probably in about 2 years from now. If I went and bought one today in 2022, I'm looking at about $550,000 for a paver. So there has been some great increases in there. As I mentioned, paving is a big, we have the paver, but paving is a big part of what we do. We pave about 30 miles annually a year. We have 600, as I mentioned earlier, we have 614 miles of roads. Average asphalt road lasts 20 years. Do the math, we got to do about 30 miles a year just to keep our system up before it deteriorates too far. When I first began and doing the engineering back in the early 90s, it cost us about $75,000 to do a 1 mile road. And that was a full depth, pulverize it, regrade it back out, pave it, paint it, put shoulders on. We figured $75,000 a mile. That number right now is about $215,000 a mile. So the asphalt's gone from about $18 a ton to over $50 a ton. Every year when we do these projects, we take a look at it and we say, all right, we do have a large asphalt firm in town here. What would it cost for them to do that project compared to us? We compare those prices to make sure that it is a better deal for us. Every year it turns out we can pave the roads cheaper than if we hire a contractor to do those roads. So we have to keep our equipment up so we can save money doing those. Recently we started doing some thin overlays and we also been doing cold in place where you actually grind up the asphalt, inject oil, and lay it right back down. So you're actually driving right back on the asphalt, and we put a 2-inch cap on that. We've been trying to experiment, trying to do different types of work, just to make the dollars last a little bit longer. Our paving budget is about $6.5 million a year. About $2.96 million that comes from the registration fee every year. Without that money, right now we have a PACER rating of 7, and a PACER rating is every year we go rate the roads on a scale of 1, you don't want to drive on it, to 10 is a brand new road. Infrastructure Committee years ago said we want to maintain our roads at an average of 7, which is a good road, okay? If we would lose any of that funding, our PACER rating will fall. That's no doubt we can't do without it. Just as a side note, I know there's been some little conversation about what happens when we replace that money with ARPA money. ARPA money is not eligible for general transportation aids because it's considered a revenue, where the wheel tax is not considered. So that's one thing for you can talk about. And I'll get into GTA in a little bit here. Another thing that we do is general maintenance. We do a lot of patching, crack filling, ditching, chip sealing, centerline, edge line striping, replacing culverts, mowing, tree cutting, cleaning up after a windstorm, picking up trash, basically anything inside the right of way. That budget, we got $3.1 million. The budget is about $4 million. 3.1 of that come from GTA, General Transportation Aids. General Transportation Aids is a very long formula, but the two key numbers in that is everybody's share of cost, SOC, and a 6-year rolling average. So whatever we spend, they take a look at that for 6 years down the road, okay? The infrastructure's been getting GTA 101 for the last 3 or 4 months. They've really grasped a hold of the idea and understand it. They've been really doing well on that. We had a great conversation at our last meeting. We brought in an expert with GTA to talk about it. But basically, like I said, it's on a 6-year average. So if you end up shorting yourself 1 year and say, all right, this year we're just going to take everything from Jim at the highway and let him put his feet up and not do any work, you're going to be chasing that for the next 6 years to catch that number back up. Because again, it's a 6-year rolling average. And once you start falling behind, that's a number that you don't want to fall behind. Again, the infrastructure's been reviewing our department's 30-year plan and a gap analysis to ensure that we continue to capture our needs and allowable expenditures that to ensure our GTA goes in a positive direction. Finally, we're in Wisconsin, so we plow snow and treat ice. Our 2022 budget for winter maintenance is about $3.1 million. We've seen a huge increase in salt prices. Again, I go back to when I started as commissioner, 2006, $37.45 a ton. Today, this year, we're at $92.11 a ton for salt. One thing we're trying to do different to help that is we use a lot of salt brine. You hear about brining and you see it on the back of the truck. It saves us thousands of dollars a year. We're looking back right now, we're probably over the last few years, we've saved about $95,000 a year with the brine, depending on the winter, okay? One thing brining does, it helps the environment and it helps the salt costs. The best way I can explain it, when we pre-wet with that brine, and I know a lot of people say, you're putting all this salt down, spraying the roads, my cars are getting full of it. Here's 2 ways to look at it. One, we pre-wet the salt, so when that salt drops out, imagine if I had a handful of salt right now and just threw it on the concrete, it's gonna splatter. I'm gonna lose about 30% of that with bounce into the ditch. It's gone, it's in the streams. We pre-wet it, salt needs water to begin working, so we're giving it that jump start, and now it's nice and wet, and I throw it down, it stays right there. So we have such a great savings there. We have 3 high-capacity briners that can make about 5,000 gallons of brine an hour. Last year, we produced about 400,000 gallons of brine. Brine, when we put it down on the road, we put about 50 gallons down in a lane mile, and each gallon only has 2.28 pounds of salt in it. So when you see all that's out there, it's mainly water, but it's down on the road and it's sticking. One last thing about the winter, we worked hard on it long with the WCHA. You're going to see green lights on top of our county vehicles this year when we're out plowing. We had the law change that only municipal vehicles, so everybody doesn't put them on top of the buyer's guide vehicle and everybody else out there. Only on municipal vehicles, you're going to see green lights. You can see it easier to the eye. The reds and blues are the most noticeable to your eye, but Bill wouldn't allow me to have reds and blues on our vehicles. As a side note, Minnesota does allow blues and reds on their plow trucks, and they were running into issues where people were pulling over in front of the plow trucks because they thought you're getting pulled over. So they ran into issues. So we're going to have green lights this year on the vehicles, and it also lets you know, hey, that's a big flipping truck in front of me, okay? So I better watch out. I don't want to run into that, you know. Some upcoming projects on our county systems. Our biggest project we're going to have in some time here is Highway K from Wausau up to the county line. We put in the bridges this year. The bridges should be done probably within the next 2 weeks. Next year, we're going to be paving the project all the way, again, from Wausau up to the county line, including a roundabout at WW and Highway K by the Village of Maine Municipal Hall and the school there. The project is about $8.9 million. We applied for STP Rural, STP Urban, safety funds, and MSI multimodal funds on that. And we actually secured $4.3 million of different funding for that project. So we did really well in securing that. And we're waiting to hear back in mid-September on a couple other projects that we submitted in the bipartisan law. I just want to close up with one thing to remind people to slow down in work zones. All my workers have families, okay, just like everybody here. And they want to go home just like you at the end of the night. I go talk to schools, service groups. I've lost track of how many trips I've made to Madison testifying in front of people down there to get different laws passed. We still have the same issues. I have one of my workers who retired and passed away, unfortunately. He was hit 13 times in his vehicle. He was hit 13 times. 13 times he was rear-ended out there. About 2 months ago, 96 weeks ago, one of my workers was out on Highway 29 working on a concrete patch, and all of a sudden he heard the cones go down behind him, and he dove out of the way. I had two guys there, but the closest one, they said, they guesstimate that truck, the box truck, which never slowed down, missed Cody by about 15 inches. So, please slow down. My biggest fear as commissioner, and I tell groups this all the time, it's not my equipment breaking down. It's not floods or tornadoes or snowstorms or whatever Mother Nature wants to throw at me. It's not even not getting money from you guys for my budget. I can work through all that stuff. My biggest fear is I have to go some night, knock on somebody's door, and say, your loved one's not coming home tonight. So I ask you, as motorists, talk to your groups, talk to your people, have them slow down in work zones, okay? That's my one ask. I would like some money for my budget also, but my main ask is, please, slow down in those work zones, okay? That's all I have for my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'm here, and I'll be here for a while.
Any questions for Jim? Supervisor Shafinsky, please.
One very top-level question. So the roundabouts in
Thank you. Roundabouts are kind of the flavor of the day. It's, engineers certainly get into habits as well, and that's the thing. Now you see them everywhere. What just from a cost perspective, what's the cost benefit as opposed to a relatively non-busy intersection but we see roundabouts going in, and why does it make sense to do that on a new project, and why do we sometimes see those happening where it's like it's not a terribly busy environment, and yet we see that being done? So just a little background.
Most, and I can't say all, but most roundabouts, what they take a look at is the accident rate. The accident rate at that intersection of Highway K and WW was our highest accident rate in Marathon County. I was actually surprised to see it. I thought it would be up on Highway A and K, to be honest with you, but that intersection is the highest accident rate in Marathon County. So that roundabout itself is going to cost about $1.4 million to put in. Time you put in a signalized intersection, signal lights are not cheap by any means. And then you have the maintenance on the signal lights. So they're almost a wash. The advantage of having those roundabouts is if you do have accidents, they're never at a 90. They're always glaring accidents. So you may still have accidents. You should never have a serious accident within a roundabout. And that's the main reason we put them there.
Supervisor Marash.
Thank you. I just had a question about the overlay you mentioned, that you just started doing that. So I was curious, how long have you been doing that, and how do you feel it's working so far?
The very first one we put down was on County Trunk Highway and probably time flies. I'm guessing 4 or 5 years ago, we've seen great results. We're doing more every year. You have to have the right road. Your road can't be falling apart. You need to have good base course underneath that road because your road's only as good as what's underneath it, okay? So if we find a road that, yeah, the bottom layer isn't too bad yet, the top layer is just getting a little cracked, we've been doing those and we've had great success with them.
Supervisor Wilhelm.
I take Highway K home pretty much every day after work. And
Sorry.
when you brought up the roundabout, it's bad. When you brought up the roundabout, when I work third shift, I count the cars coming down K from Merrill, anywhere from to Highway L. And usually it was somewhere between 110 and 130 cars I would meet just to pay attention. Now, are you concerned about any traffic issues having the roundabout in place there?
No, the roundabout's being designed for 20 years out from now, so they project the traffic on that road, and don't quote me, but I think that traffic on that road's around 9,000 peak up for the day, and I believe they're designing for like 15,000, so they take that in consideration.
Because times during the day is when it's really busy, your morning rush and your afternoon rush.
No, they take that in consideration, especially with the school there. They factor the school traffic into that, so it's designed for the peak hours.
Supervisor Crivelli.
Thank you for the presentation. The one question that I get from some of my constituents, especially my wife, is, what's happening with certain areas that are in construction or during construction, and what's the update, and where do we find the information? One in particular that she's concerned about are the going down to one lane on the Highway U Bridge going over 51, and it's been closed for quite some time now. We don't know where to go for updates. Is there someplace we can go?
Unfortunately, I can't give you a direct answer, but I can give you two answers. How's that? If it's a Department of Transportation project, which the U one is, some people don't know if it's a state project or it's a county project, so that's going to take a little research. If you go to the Department of Transportation 511, they'll give you every update on every road, and you can pick North Central region. You can look through the whole region, see every project, and they'll give you an update. If it's a county project, generally Kevin's been really good at getting those on our Marathon County announcement page. So you can go to Marathon County announcement, or you can go to the highway, pick projects, and they'll link you back over to the announcement. So either one of the Marathon County or WISDOT 511.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Mr. Commissioner, thank you so much for your presentation.
Now the main act is coming up.
Now we have the next department. We have the airport director, Mr. Brian Griefey. Mr. Griefey, please.
I've warmed up.
I won't smash too many buttons by pushing this on here. Thank you, Chair Gibbs. Good evening. My name is Brian Griefey. I'm the airport director at the Central Wisconsin Airport. I was going to prepare a PowerPoint presentation, but Kim said I had to keep it under an hour, so I'll just get up here, hit a few of the highlights, and have some time for questions and answers afterwards. I will leave some things out, so feel free to stop me along the way, but I do want to touch on the Central Wisconsin Airport Board, the makeup of that, our budget and our budget overview, our CIP program for the coming year and years, and air service in particular. I know that's first and foremost on a lot of your minds. Before we get into that, a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry 18 years now, at the Central Wisconsin Airport for 6.5 years. Before this, I've been in Duluth, Minnesota, and Aspen, Colorado, working at airports out there. So I come with a little bit of experience. Central Wisconsin Joint Airport Board is governed, the airport is governed by the Central Wisconsin Joint Airport Board. It's a joint effort between Marathon and Portage County. The ownership percentage is based on real estate value of both counties. It was established in 1969. It's a 7-member board. 4 members from Marathon County, 3 elected, 1 appointed, and 3 members from Portage County, 2 elected, 1 appointed. Airport employees are Marathon County employees. That's one of the distinctions. That's purely Marathon County. The one exception is myself. I'm a contract employee, although benefits follow Marathon County benefits. We have 19 full-time employees plus part-time seasonal and year-round part-time and 4 interns. So it puts us at an FTE of around 22 people throughout the course of the year. That does not include the airport tenants, including the airlines, the FBO, the fixed base operator, ground support equipment, concessionaires, rental cars, hospital medevac operation, corporate flight departments, and vendors. It's been a few years since we've actually done a study of the number of employees, and it's certainly changed in the last year. But prior to COVID, it was right around 100 people, FTE equivalent, at the airport. We are fully staffed. That's one thing we are proud of, and we're hanging on by our fingernails and toenails. I like to say that's because we are the best department within Marathon County. Sorry, Jim, if you're. But we do have an announcement or a retirement announcement that we'll need to look at filling coming up pretty quick. Much of what we do at the board and at staff level is because we operate in a highly regulated environment, namely FAA, TSA, DNR. FAA regulations in particular, but all of them get into how we can generate revenue, what we can do with our revenue, how we can structure our leases, how long leases can be, how we operate, how we mow. They really get into everything we do. So a lot of the reasons and the way we do things are because of the regulatory environment we operate in. Moving on to budget, we are an enterprise fund. One thing I'm very proud of, and I know the Joint Airport Board is too, Central Wisconsin Airport generates all of the funds needed to operate the airport at the airport. So we don't rely on county funds for operations and capital projects. Our 2022, this year's operating and capital budget is $5.3 million, but this does include a large transfer from fund balance, about $1.7 million. I'll get this here. To design our runway shift project. That's the highway. Oh, he's got more money than me. Let's take that one. All right, there we go. That's the area in blue. You can see the transfer from fund balance. That money will be reimbursed with a grant from the FAA, the State Bureau of Aeronautics, and there's a local share made up by passenger facility charges. So that'll be reimbursed to us over the next 1 to 2 years. Our traditional operating budget, when you take that out, is about $3.5 million. And that's really the rest of what you see on the pie chart. Our largest revenue source is parking fees, single revenue source. Rent is broken out between a few, that's slightly more, but a single entity parking is our largest revenue source. What I really like about that is it's purely optional. People choose to park there because of the convenience and affordable price. They can get dropped off and it won't cost them a dime, but people choose to park and it supplements our income. It really, quite honestly, it's parking that makes our operation work and charging for parking. COVID-19 and the worker shortage certainly had an impact on our budget and our operations. That's really notable on this employment chart. 2019, actually 2020, we were on track to have a record year. January and February of 2020 were our highest January and February of all time. And then COVID hit and brought down our passengers very significantly. We recovered from that relatively well. Last summer, we were running approximately 11 to 12 flights daily, which is pretty good. That's very similar to what we had pre-pandemic. But then the worker shortage hit. And the worker shortage has been more of an impact on our operations than COVID-19 we found, and it's going to be more drawn out. We did have some support from the federal government to get through this. Between CARES, ARPA, and CRISA, I'm not going to spell those out for you because I probably will get them wrong, but for the federal funds, we've applied for and received $8 million in support. $7.8 million. that money can be used to support our operations. Strategically, we've tried to spend that down smartly, but as quickly as possible, primarily to reimburse for personnel expenses, utility expenses, but then prepaying debt. So going forward, our long-term financial commitment will be less than it otherwise would. You may remember some of the board members that have been on for a while. I think it was this spring, maybe last winter, this board supported prepaying debt for our terminal building. Actually, it's our rental car facility. So that is paid off because of these funds. That'll reduce our long-term cost in operating the airport. In doing so, we've actually been putting money into our fund balance, again, strategically every year since the pandemic. Give or take, depending on the year, about $1 million into our fund balance. The reason for that is it does have a shelf life. After 5 years, the funds go away. But then also we can borrow from fund balance that we've built up, if we stay tight for the coming years. And finally, the FAA appreciates it. The FAA, the folks we work with out of Chicago, it's the same number of staff they've had, and they've got roughly twice the program that they've had to deal with, including these supplemental funding sources. So they appreciate that work, and it helps us compete well for other type of funding, primarily airport improvement project funding. That being said, because we have been putting money into the fund balance, and we probably will this year to the tune of about $1 million, we anticipate and are prepared to deficit spend for hopefully a year or two until our airport enplanement numbers turn around. Enplanements are passengers getting on planes, and still be relatively comfortable from a fund balance standpoint. Looking forward into 2023, our biggest unknown for the budget is personnel expense. We do want to recognize that investment in our Seaway team is going to be important to be competitive, both regionally but also in our industry. You can see it with my background. People do travel around the country in this industry. So we keep a highly trained workforce that is very competitive. So we're at risk of losing them. So we want to make sure we're at least competitive from a pay standpoint. And I know the class compensation study is taking all that into considerations. So we will be prepared. Let's see, moving into capital improvement project. I briefly mentioned the runway shift project. That is our big project, one of our biggest projects we've had really since the airport was built. We are looking at moving our primary runway. This is the result of a planning study that started over 6 years ago, where the FAA had asked us to look at our runway geometry. If you can, I don't have a picture of it, but it looks like an L. We have 2 overlapping thresholds. The FAA has asked us to separate those thresholds, hence the runway shift. After a planning period, we determined that we could shift the runway approximately 400 feet to the east, stay on airport property, and get the project built. We bid it out this summer, total project cost of about $18 million. So we're still working on funding for that. To date, we've already received approximately $10 to $11 million of that funding. So we've got a $7 million shortfall. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to receive those funds from the FAA. There's a supplemental funding source that's available that was approved for 2022 that has not been spent yet. Honestly, there hasn't even been any instructions on how to receive that funds. In 2022, federal year ends in 6 weeks. In our conversations with the FAA, we anticipate a notice of funding opportunity, a NOFO coming out that's going to have a very quick turnaround time. Our engineers, the state of Wisconsin are prepared to make this project be one of the first out of the gates if and when that NOFO comes out. And that should position us well to get that project built and funded for 2023. Locally, that project, it's a large project, but the local share will be approximately $900,000. That will be reimbursed through passenger facility charge in 1 to 2 years as well. Any questions on capital projects or operations before I move into air service? I know that's a hot topic for everybody right now. Certainly is for me.
Any questions for Brian on operations and/or the capital of the airport?
Okay. Well, the good news, just in the last 2 weeks, we received a federal small community air service development grant from the DOT to promote Central Wisconsin Airport, or low-cost service to Central Wisconsin Airport. Specifically, it is to low-cost service to Southwest Florida, Orlando, or Phoenix, Arizona. Any one of those would qualify for it. If you recall, this is something that the board, Marathon County Board and Portage County Board supported. It was this spring, early summer. It had a very quick turnaround time. Quite honestly, it was highly competitive. There's only approximately $10 million nationwide for these SCASD grants, Small Community Air Service Development Grants. We received 900,000 of that, so very large percentage of it, second largest in the country, and very excited to get working on that. There's been a lot of discussion specifically around different airlines. It's not specific to one airline. Yes, we're certainly talking with Sun Country, and they've been a great partner. They supported the grant with a letter of support, but I'm also talking to other low-cost carriers and quite honestly legacy carriers that would be willing to honor the terms of the SCASD grant. Cautiously optimistic we will see something. I don't think it'll be this winter, but going into potentially summer of 2023, winter of 2023 should look a lot better. By then, the worker shortage hopefully will have turned the corner, so the legacy carriers as well will see some additional service on. I haven't covered really the airport facility or details about airport operations, how we operate, where we operate. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll let you have some of your time back.
Any additional questions for Brian? No. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs.
And we will move on to item 8B, and that is reports and/or presentations by standing committee chairs or designees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to report on the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee. Tonight you have before you 5 different proposals on
John, the mic's not picking you up, so either grab a handheld, please, or, sorry.
Sit down and see if that helps.
Thank you.
You will have before you 5 different proposals for funding through using the American Rescue Plan Act funding. I want to just give you a little bit of background on the ARPA process, but Marathon County received $26,316,678 through the Act. There's about a double that amount in Marathon County that went to other local units of government. The city of Wausau, for instance, received $15 million, and all communities in the county received money. We're all subject to following the U.S. Department of Treasury guidelines. And the eligible expenses include public health expenses, negative economic impacts associated with the pandemic, service to disproportionately impacted communities, whether it's industries or individuals, premium pay for people who worked through the pandemic, infrastructure, including broadband, water sewer projects, revenue replacement. Revenue replacement is our lost revenue, and they assumed that we would grow our revenue at 5.1%, and if we didn't, we would be able to capture that or the actual revenue replacement. However, there's a minimum of $10 million where you don't have to prove it, so all communities can spend in that money. There's a great deal more flexibility in how those funds are spent. You calculate on an annual basis what your revenue loss was, and you'll have some discretion. And then the final area is for administration. The funds, the ARPA funds need to be encumbered or committed by December 30th of 2024, and they must be spent by December 31st of 2026. So we had, in the past, approved a number of projects, and those projects include paid time off balances. During the pandemic, a number of people couldn't take time off, so they accrued or accumulated sick leave or vacation time. We brought that down. We budgeted $500,000. We actually spent about $150,000, $160,000. We committed to an advertising campaign called Uniquely Wisconsin Tourism Campaign at $60,000, trying to help the tourism industry recover. We entered into a lease with community partners at their new campus for space for county agencies at $42,900. We're in the process of doing courtroom and jail AV enhancements that will make it easier to handle court using audiovisual technologies at $634,000. And we committed earlier this year through the Public Service Commission broadband grant expansion process, approximately $3,950,835 to broadband expansion efforts in the county. That part of that was a loan to a pledge of a loan to Bug Tussle. There are some limitations, so we'll be revisiting that. But we've committed to date just under $5.2 million of that $26 million. Last year, we held 3 public hearings and invited the public to comment on how those dollars will be spent. We developed a process with the first round of applications coming in on April 1st. Administration reviewed those applications for completeness. There was a presentation. Each group was given up to 10 minutes to present to the committee, and we made recommendations to you that are before you tonight and next Tuesday. The next round of applications are due on October 1st. To date, we received about $41.5 million of requests of that $26 million, so we're oversubscribed. $36,400,000 is pending. Again, that basically 5.2 has been approved. Of that amount, a number of projects were withdrawn. There's a chart in the packet. $8.4 million of projects were withdrawn by the requesting agency. We did not fund 3 projects at $4.7 million. And we're recommending 15 tonight, or on Tuesday, recommending approximately $15,899,149 of spending, and we'll go through those to date. After, if we do those, make those approvals, well, based upon what we've done today, we have $21,132,000 available. If you take that $15.9 million out, we'll have $5,223,000 to allocate in the future. And one of the things we will be doing is we will be reviewing all of the authorizations to make sure that we are spending those dollars down. If we are not spending them down, we will recapture those dollars and put them back into the pot so that we make sure that we encumber and spend those dollars within the timelines afforded. The projects before you tonight, we'll talk about a little bit later when those projects come up and the specifics on those. We did add 2 projects at the last meeting. The water design work at Marathon Park, because we thought it was an emergency situation. If we don't do it now, we'll lose use of the park for the fair next year, and that would be a significant negative impact. In the Dancy Tower, the DNR fire tower or communication tower is substandard, and we can't go on it anymore, and that's critical for law enforcement and our ability to communicate. And we view that as a critical issue, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the meeting. But that's by way of background where we are.
Okay, next we have Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick update on the Infrastructure Committee meeting on August 1st. The committee reviewed and approved our recommendations to the strategic plan on objectives 8.7 and 10.12. We went into closed session on possible purchase of property for future building sites. After coming out of the closed session, the committee provided directions to the staff to continue their efforts to pursue a site for the future relocation of the highway department and other county departments. We approved a resolution vacating the 28th Avenue corridor right-of-way, which is in your packet and will be asked to be voted on Tuesday. We also approved a jurisdiction transfer on County Road B to the Village of Marathon. That's also in your packet this evening. We had a presentation from Tim Ramberg on GTA, General Transportation Aids. I know Commissioner Griesbach mentioned that in his presentation. I did attend the same presentation in June at the Highway Conference. It was very informative and basically explained how the state determines how much money the county will receive each year from their road aids. We received an update from Jerry Klein and Supervisor Robinson on the broadband construction projects. And last, Administrator Leonard gave an update on Workday project and his budget process for 2023. Thank you.
Okay, we go back to Supervisor Robinson.
I'm going to shift gears to the broadband task force, and I just want to give you a quick update. We had the federal government, through the Federal Communication Commission, had a program known as Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. It was a reverse auction where companies bid down and they asked for a subsidy. The lowest subsidy won. In Marathon County, we had two parties. Charter Spectrum was one, and the second one was LTD Broadband out of Minnesota. Charter has received approval, and they are moving forward with their work in many of the northern towns now. LTD has been a question mark, and just recently the Federal Communications Commission has determined that they are ineligible, and they've removed their designation. They have not approved them, so that area, primarily in the western part of the county, they'll go back into another auction. They'll have to look at who's underserved, unserved, and it will be bid. It's not good news, but the only good news out of it is because LTD had been designated as a potential player, we couldn't qualify for many of the other federal funding programs, and now that impediment has been removed, so we'll be looking at that, but we'll be trying to get a better handle on how that will impact us in the future. And we were hoping, because it was gigabyte service that would have been delivered to many of the homes in that area. Unfortunately, that service won't be available, so we'll have to go back and work with other internet service providers to fill some of those gaps.
And the one advantage that we have with the bug tussle proposal is at least we have, in some cases, an opportunity to provide some kind of service, whether it be fixed wireless now, when they have their project fully implemented. Other questions? Okay, we will move on to review and discussion on Tuesday meeting agenda items under ordinances, under 9A1, Town of Ween, Patrick Schreiner. Ordinance 21-22. Any questions on that ordinance? Okay, we'll move on to item 9A2, Town of McMillan, Doug and Julie Seehafer, ordinance 22-22. Any questions on that change? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to resolutions from the Environmental Resources Committee under 9B, 1A, Town of Wausau, Jim Moore Creek Road, A180 Agriculture District to Commercial Light Manufacturing District, Resolution 47-22. Any questions? Okay, from the Town of Wausau, item 9B, 1B, Town of Wausau to amend the Town Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 17. Moving on to the Infrastructure Committee, item 9B, 2A, resolution to remove 28th Avenue corridor. Okay, moving on to item 9B3 from the Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Item 9B3A, approve the 2022 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution 50-22. Any questions? Supervisor Lamont, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually had a question on the 28th Avenue corridor.
Okay.
Do I understand right that we're going to give the properties that were bought to the town of Maine and Wausau?
Corp Counsel is going to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the county does own certain properties along that 28th Avenue corridor. This resolution would not do anything with those properties, but it would allow the county to divest itself of those properties in the future by way of either public sale to municipality, et cetera. So there isn't a specific plan in this resolution for how those properties would be divested, but it is kind of the first step in getting to that point.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Then moving on, any questions on the approval of the 2022 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution 50-22? Okay, we'll move on to item 9B, 3B, a resolution amending the 2022 capital improvement budget for the Dancy Radio Tower in the amount of $371,860 and transfer from the American Rescue Plan Act, Resolution 51-22, and we have Captain Milhausen here with us to give a brief description of what the project is. Mr. Milhausen, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't sure I was going to get put in the hot seat or not tonight. I guess I'll just kind of make it really brief. The Dancy Tower, and I don't know, Madam Clerk, if you have the slides from, I don't think there's any in this packet, but if we could go to the HR Finance one. Okay. Okay.
I'll type.
We'll get something for you here so we can show you some visuals as well. So this project kind of goes back to a problem with the tower. We don't own this tower site. It's a radio infrastructure tower for our public safety. It covers our fire, law, and EMS. And we were on a shared tower that's owned by the Department of Natural Resources. About 2 or 3 years ago, we noticed in our inspection that that tower was showing signs of degradation and was in need of repair. And talks broke down between Marathon County and the Department of Natural Resources about funding and shared ownership at that time. Just to give you a reference as to where we're talking, this map here, thank you. Thank you, sir. This map will show you kind of where I'm talking when I say Dancy. Some people may not know. It's the extreme south central portion of Marathon County. This yellow pin map shows where that's at. That's right along the southern edge of the Big Old Plain flowage, right on County Highway C, and just on the north end of the Mead Wildlife Area. So there's a pin map over here by the 97, that's North Marshfield Radio Tower, and then there's one here in Mosinee. That's 22.2 mile span, and without that tower that we call the Dancy Tower in the middle, we would lose approximately 160,000 square miles of radio coverage for our emergency services. So going back to how we got here, the DNR was not willing to give up some ownership to Marathon County for us to put about $500,000 at that time into building a new tower at that site. So they did agree to stick about $50,000 into renovations, and that never did occur. And then recently, that tower site failed its structural integrity test, and we can no longer keep our equipment there. We are not able to get people to climb the tower to service the equipment that's currently there. As you've heard of quite often, Bug Tussle is in Marathon County, and they are building, I believe, 17 tower sites throughout the county. Jerry Klein and I were instrumental in meeting with them throughout the process, and Mr. Robinson in facilitating some of these meetings as well, and outline what would be beneficial to Marathon County's public safety infrastructure for tower sites. And we had identified the need to have one in our strategic plan in the southern part of the county here that could be beneficial to our interoperability. And I was not sure where that was at, and within about a day or so of learning the bad news, I contacted Bug Tussle and found out that they actually are under construction 0.9 miles away from where we have our tower that we are now. And that's one of the towers that we had asked to be allowed to put equipment on. We quickly met with them, and they have been in agreement to allow us to go on it. The reason the expense is what you've heard, and I can show you some of the breakdown if you want, is basically because we have to purchase new equipment to go on that tower, because I can't shut the tower down that's currently in operation for the reasons earlier stated that we would lose that service. It's basically one for one, meaning that we're going to put the same equipment down there that what we currently have, with the exception of at the bottom you'll see simulcast fire paging. If you've been on the county board for any length of time or active in the townships, you've probably heard that our fire and EMS paging system has room for improvement. And I believe this is an opportunity for where we could do that for about $53,000. I'll just click down real quick and just show you where we're at. Currently, right now, right down in this white area, white is bad. White is where we do not have coverage, or we have very spotty coverage. So that covers that entire Mead area and covers us actually up 107 north of 153 and over into the town in Knowlton. If we spend that extra $53,000 and we add the paging channel, as you can see, gray is good, and we fill in that entire area. So it stands to greatly improve that paging area in that southern part of the county. So that was my recommendation when we were going, so that was included in the amount that you heard earlier in the resolution. I guess that's it in a nutshell. I don't want to take up a ton of your time, but I am prepared to answer questions if you have them, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Supervisor Robinson?
Just like to point out that this is possible because the agreement that we entered into with Bug Tussle last year, where we guaranteed their $25 million worth of loans, provided us with 24 fibers in within their fiber relays, but also space on each and every one of those towers for our purposes. And this is one of those benefits of that arrangement, and we're guaranteeing the money, they're paying us back, and they're paying us a premium with additional basis points. But we serve the residents of the county with wireless service, fiber, and now we'll be able to use it for public safety.
I guess if I could, just one
Go
more
ahead,
thing.
good.
I do want to let you know, if we were to go on our own and build a site of our own without bug tussle, we're looking right around that $1.3 million range and about 1.5 to 2 years in order to actually start to completion by the time we do soil testing and archaeology studies and all the things that need to be done with building a new tower. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise, in my opinion.
Okay, we have questions. Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the packet, it looks like there's an error. Page 22 says Resolution 5122, and it refers to the Marathon County Water Service. That is the same as page 29 in the packet, 5222. So Resolution 5122 for this project doesn't seem to be in the packet. Just wanted to point that out.
The clerk says she's going to swap that out right now, but you'd have to update your packet, so it will be updated. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Captain Milhausen. We'll move on to the next, and that is the resolution amending the 2022 capital improvement budget for the Parks Department, Marathon Park Water Service design in the amount of $74,400 and the transfer from the American Rescue Plan Act. And we have with us the Parks Director, if anybody has any questions, or if she wants to give us a brief description of the project.
Chairman Gibbs, members of the board. This is brought to you today, so at the beginning of the summer. Oh, sorry, thank you. Thank you again for having me. This was brought to our attention at the beginning of this summer when the water department of the city of Wausau had told us that they weren't going to turn our water on Marathon Park, and this really affects the west half of Marathon Park from the junction all the way to 17th Avenue. We do know we have an aging infrastructure in Marathon Park, as we do in all of our park facilities, and we did have we have a small project fund where we had money available to do a utility mapping, because that's one of the things we needed to start with in the park, was to map all the utilities and figure out what's there, because there's a lot of new utilities, there's old utilities, there are abandoned utilities, and we need to know what was there. And this has really stemmed from just working even with the fair to figure out where our hookups are, what water systems we need to have on, what we don't. But the reason why it affects the western half of the park, and that is where the issues are, is that dead ends. Our water service does not loop through Marathon Park. It's a water main that comes in, it dead ends kind of in the midway area, and then they have laterals from there. That laterals serve the bathrooms on the west end of the park. There's 2 sets of bathrooms. It serves the campground. Right now, we every year winterize those facilities. They're not year-round facilities. We blow them out. Where they don't meet code is that they are underground. And the new code, I don't know exactly what year it was put in place, but the new code is that these laterals have to daylight where you are winterizing them. And if they're not daylighted, then there's the chance for bacterial. And that's where the city is coming from. This really stemmed from the issues with PFAS this year, and they've been very diligent about all their water systems. We had some other issues within the city as far as you can tell the kayak statue is not on currently, because we had the same issue with the clean out being underground, and we needed to bring that above ground. That has been fixed. Many drinking fountains were not turned on for the same reason. So it's the system as a whole. Where this issue comes is we have a campground in Marathon Park. By state code, you have to have water service within 400 feet of your campground. And it has to be potable water in order for you to be compliant to have the campground. That is a revenue source for us. We cannot open the campground without water. And the other big part, we do have rentals throughout the park, and I have information on what rentals we have. But the other big use of the park is the fair. The fair utilizes all those water systems on the west side for their vendors, for their cattle infrastructure. Anything that we have for the fair uses those. If we don't have water, we can't have those services. So in putting this together and really looking at the timeline of what's important for this is because of the timing of the fair is the same time every year, and trying to figure out how long this project would take. We're bringing the design portion forward tonight, and that is what is in front of you because the timeline is critical. If we can get the services in the park mapped and figure out what's there, then we can have a design for it to bring it to code, and we'll have a couple options from, it's Becker Hoppe. We went out for a request for bids for this. We only had one company bid, which was Becker Hoppe. We had another company call us and say their work schedule is just too busy, so they did not bid on it. But Becker Hoppe will work with us to give us a plan. Then that plan will be ready. If we do it this year, it will be ready to go to bid right away, January 1st of 2023, barring that the construction part of it gets funded through the capital project or capital improvement fund or projects that are coming forward to you later through the budget process. But no matter what, we do need a plan to move forward, and whether that is moving forward in January of 2023 or in January of 2024, the plan is still needed in order for the city of Wausau to know that we are going to fix it and we have a plan to fix it, and then to know what those costs are for that capital improvement project. If we enter into this agreement with Becker Hoppe to do the design services in 2022, they will have a better estimate of what the project costs will be by the time that you see the capital improvement projects to come forward, to know exactly what that cost is going to be. So that's why it's critical. The other part of it is if we can bid the project out January and February of 2023, as soon as road limits are off and the ground is unthawed, we can have a contractor in ground fixing it if the project gets funded and be done by mid-July for the fair in August. That will mean that our campgrounds are closed for 2023 at this point because the water service will not be intact. But this does not affect our ice arena. It does not affect Eastgate Hall because those are year-round facilities that don't need to be winterized. So the water is constantly moving in those. So this is the design portion of it, to be able to know what we need to fix and what that cost will be, and to try to get it fixed before the fair next year.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Any questions for Jamie? Supervisor Marash.
Thank you. So with the West Side Master Plan, I'm assuming that Becker Hoppe will have all those concepts and make sure that no matter what is picked at the final won't affect any of their plans that they propose.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, that is the plan. We'll work hand in hand with that. And looking at our initial concepts we're working through, most of that won't be affected with where our water mains currently are, but we will definitely keep that in mind. Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to item 9B, 3D, authorizing expenditure of ARPA funds for a Regional Forensic Science Center, Resolution 53-22. Any questions on that resolution? Supervisor Robinson.
Just a note that this is one of those that has a contingency. We've heard about the need for the Forensic Science Center, and this is not paying for the entire cost, but it's contingent upon us receiving funding from the state. Our commitment is $2 million contingent upon the Building Commission or the legislature making the approval. That will be one that we'll be monitoring. If we don't receive it, we'll withdraw that approval at a later date, but this commits us to that $2 million.
I think the fact that we put this as a contingency, meaning that if the state building commission does not come through with roughly $8 million, the $2 million would not be spent. Supervisor Sandalski.
I just had a question on is there any figures for the annual operating costs for this? Once it's all built in that.
I'll have the chair of the task force on the Regional Forensic Science Center, our Vice Chair McEwen, also provide some information on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick update. The Regional Morgue Task Force was developed in 2017. It's changed now. The name was Forensic Science Center, Regional Forensic Science Center. We went through the process for the last 5 years, and it's kind of changed as far as partnerships, trying to get funding for it. And we did have Wifley do a business plan for us. I do not know the exact figures, but it would be almost levy neutral. We would still we have a budget for the medical examiner now that would still be included in there. But they did this business plan for us, and they developed a plan where they contacted 37 counties north and a few south of Marathon County to see if they would be interested in utilizing our morgue instead of going to Milwaukee or Fond du Lac or UW-Madison, which are all down in the southern part of the state. So the exact numbers I don't have, but like I said, it was the business plan would work as far as financing the Forensic Science Center if it was here, and we did get the services from the other counties that said they were interested in utilizing our services. The $2 million, the total cost for it, when it first started out, was about 2.6. It's now between 8 and 10 million. But many things have changed since 2017. We have been working with partnerships with the Aspirus, with Marshfield Clinic, Ascension, and they are interested, but no partnerships were confirmed. So many things could change as far as what the bottom line would be for operations of the Forensic Science Center. Now, there would be significant savings for law enforcement. Anytime there's an autopsy, and if it's something that might be criminal, a detective or a deputy has to accompany the medical examiner down to UW-Madison or Milwaukee for that. And there's also inconvenience for families that have family members that are trying to get an autopsy for. Sometimes there's a 2-day to a week wait for them to get this autopsy done for Marathon County, because they will take care of their own county autopsies first. So I don't know if Administrator Leonard worked with some of the numbers on that, but I don't have the exact numbers for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair of the Task Force and Chair Gibbs. Just to reinforce the point, the projection from the business plan is that it does not increase the operating levy allocation from the county for the operation of the medical examiner's office. So based on all the projections, we're reasonably confident that it wouldn't require additional levy services. It would certainly increase the budget. The amount of money coming in would dramatically increase. The amount of money we would spend would likewise dramatically increase, because we would essentially be taking on a lot of additional work relative to forensic autopsy. But the revenues, based on the projections, are such that the Marathon County levy allocation would not increase. And there are some projections, in fact, where it would decrease somewhat. But again, those are projections. They're set forth in the business plan. In the business plan, if you look on the task force meeting minutes and packet information, it's been included a number of times, because it's been revised, as Vice Chair McEwen has referenced, many times since its initial draft in 2018. because the market has changed. And in fact, the most recent change we made, we did substantially increase the salary for the forensic pathologist position based on market pressures we're seeing in that, for that position within that market. There is, like many positions, but this one even more so, there is a substantial shortage of forensic pathology resources, not only in the state of Wisconsin, but nationally. So we did increase that salary to be sure that we'd be able to operate. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, a lot of the offset costs by other counties using it and saving money in transferring them and all that.
Correct. And I think the other thing that, we did include some cost savings for our own law enforcement, for the sheriff's office, as Vice Chair McEwen referenced, but there are soft savings in terms of benefits that, you are more difficult to quantify to families. Certainly, the experience, it should improve that somewhat. Certainly a very difficult time for the family. For our law enforcement partners not having to travel out of state. If you can imagine, if you're a small law enforcement operation, or even the city of Wausau, if you have to have that decedent, the deceased individual, their body transported to southern Wisconsin, that could take an entire day, where you have a detective perhaps on overtime, and at the same time you need to make sure you're staffing fully within your municipality, so that would be enhanced. There's benefits to the district attorney's office and the court system, but all those things, I encourage you all to look at to look at the business plan that is in those packets from the task force.
Okay, next we have Supervisor Cavelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just clarification, and I believe you may have answered this appropriately. Is this a revenue-generating facility when other counties use the facility?
Yes, there certainly would be a fee that would be charged to the other counties, just the same that Marathon County pays to Milwaukee or UW-Madison. There would be a fee for the autopsies, and they also did do a estimate of autopsies in these. I think it was 26 counties that were interested. Even 6 up in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, were interested in coming down. But they did do their business plan was based on the low end of autopsies. Marathon County, I believe, averages between 70 to 80 autopsies a year. In a lot of your smaller counties, Violets and Forest, they were 1 or 2 or 10. But yeah, the cost would be offset by charging these, which they're paying now when they go down south for an autopsy. So.
Okay, next we have Supervisor Rosenberg.
Yeah, did I read correctly that Brown County is also contemplating a center like this? And if so, does that affect the projections?
Yes, in fact, they just opened their forensic science center, I believe, within the last week. And they did take that into consideration when they did the surveys. Whiffley, when they did that. So it was taken into consideration. Is there going to be some people that go there? Absolutely. But the business plan was still taking that into account. But that was a good question. In fact, I just read an article on Channel 7 on that, where the Brown County, and the reason they did that too is they were taking their decedents down to Dane County, and there was a lot of transportation fees or costs with their law enforcement. And not only will it save Marathon County Sheriff's Department as far as law enforcement, but it'll save all the municipalities like Rothschilds, Kronerwetter, City of Wausau, their officers going down for these autopsies. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, other questions? Supervisor Wilhelm.
When we were in our public safety meeting, I think it was also brought up that NTC it'd be built near NTC, and there could be some possibilities of law enforcement training associated with it.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Administrator, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. As Vice Chair McEwen referenced, the project has evolved over the many years of the task force existence. in terms of partnership is one of those ways. And our most recent discussions have been with North Central Technical College about locating the Regional Forensic Science Center on that campus. Those conversations have gone very well. The North Central Technical College has agreed to essentially allow us, to give us the opportunity to build on that site at no cost. Certainly, we'd have to build the building, which comes at cost. But they're allowing us the land, and their idea is to integrate the educational experience relative to autopsies with the educational experience they already have with respect to EMTs, emergency medical technicians, and paramedics. So have essentially those facilities joined. There's also been discussion with the State of Wisconsin Department of Justice about the potential to have forensic science center services, and we do have a forensics lab here in the city of Wausau. That is a Department of Justice lab where they do various criminal justice related forensic science center tests. They're in need of a new facility. So those conversations evolve, but as Chair Robinson referenced, the resolution before you is essentially encumbering $2 million to show that Marathon County is supportive of the project, provided other support comes along. If the rest of the right now 8 to 10 million doesn't come from the state of Wisconsin or other sources, those funds would essentially divert back to the county board and the HR Finance Committee to have discussions about how to utilize them.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 9B, 3E, authorizing the expenditure of ARPA funds for a 4-year highway transportation plan, Resolution 54-22. Supervisor Robinson?
You have in your packet a delineation of what those projects look like, and again, there is an opportunity for us to capture significant amounts of state and federal aid. $35 million worth, $35.5 million worth of projects, with the county's share being about $10 million. So again, this is predicated upon our receiving the funding through either the bipartisan infrastructure law or some of the other funding sources. We will monitor it, but there are a number of roads and bridges that are included in that list. We felt as if this was an appropriate use of those funds.
Again, I think what is the commitment is 10 million, a little better than 10 million, but receiving in effect 80 cents on a dollar additional funding to get those projects completed if we're successful in the requests. Any other questions? Supervisor Baker.
Yes, if the board approves the ARPA allocation and all of the associated funding is received, what would be the expected total budget for highway expenditures in 2023? So in other words, is this intended to increase expenditures, or is it maintaining expenditures but replacing other funding?
These would be additional projects.
So then the highway budget would go from like 31 million to 38 million?
Depending on which of the projects got approved. There's certain ones for 2023, certain ones for 2024. Supervisor Robinson?
I believe there's a delineation by, Jim, is that by year? About 6 million? So the expenditures would be 6.6 million of additional funding next year, in addition to those others of which about 80% would be 6.6 million of county funds. It would help us with our general transportation aid funding potentially in the future. So I think we would get a win-win.
Administrators will also address the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not sure this is going to be an answer that is overly helpful, but I'm trying to be very transparent and honest. If we were so fortunate to get all of the projects approved through the bipartisan infrastructure law that are listed on that sheet, I'm not sure, it would have an impact on our ability to perform all of the other work that would otherwise be on our plan. So it's difficult to answer your question, Supervisor Baker. We would develop the budget based on the information we receive from our grant applications. And you've heard this certainly from me a couple times today, and you've heard it from the other department heads that you've talked about. I mean, there is a concern about the ability of individuals we have to perform the work we have to perform. The simple presence of money does not provide the mechanism to do the work. So I'm not sure that answers your question, Supervisor Baker, but it's difficult to say whether or not the budget would grow by all of the amounts listed, because we'd have to assess whether or not we have the manpower to get that work done.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Go ahead, Supervisor.
Are there activities that the county needs to undertake in the next few months before we have the budget finalized that are contingent upon us making this allocation at this point? Or would we be able to make the allocation after we see what the budget is?
Everyone's looking to the administrator to answer the question.
Supervisor Robinson, go ahead.
I'll try to answer that. I think what we're trying to do is get an idea of where the ARPA dollars will be spent so that we can leverage them. And you've only, $26 million seems like a lot of money. When you start allocating it in $10 million increments, it goes away quickly. So I think this is trying to, as best we can within the requests that we've received, allocate that money. We will be reviewing it on a regular basis, consistent with the concerns that Administrator Leonard had expressed on our ability to receive the funding. That's number one, and two is to do the work. And I think what we will do is probably on a quarterly basis as a HR Finance Committee, be reviewing the status of those requests and potentially coming back with modifications. But you can only spend the money once and commit the money once, and this is an opportunity, and Jim and his staff have done a good job of trying to outline what those projects are. So we will be looking at it, but it's important that we know where we are for planning purposes as we approach the budget.
If I could just
Go
add
ahead,
a little bit.
Administrator, please.
Again, I'm not sure this is a response that's going to be overly helpful, but when I'm going to be building the budget, the other action that HR Finance and Property took with respect to your ARPA allocations, and you can find this in the HR Finance and Property packet, is they essentially identified a number of projects that they wanted to go through the budget building process, both capital as well as a position request. So in my mind, it's helpful to know if the county board wants to essentially encumber these dollars, set them aside because they are a priority for infrastructure projects. I know that, and essentially then I don't allocate them through the budget process for other capital needs you may have. You certainly, through the budget process, can reorder and reprioritize capital projects. But if I know you want to have available to you $10 million of funds to serve as the local match for infrastructure projects, I know then not to allocate those dollars through the budget process. Essentially, I know you can't spend a dollar twice. So it's helpful in that respect. Supervisor Baker, I hope that answers your question.
That's helpful. I have one final follow-up question.
Go ahead.
If I understood Jim's presentation correctly, if we spend ARPA funding for the highway projects and we would not spend an additional, we replaced other funding, that would actually negatively impact our GTA in the future, if I understood that correct. So if that's correct, we have to be careful with that.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I want to, based on the information we have right now, I don't want to say it would negatively impact our GTA. Essentially, it has no impact on the general transportation aids. So it would be important for us to schedule, kind of as Jim alluded to, it's very important to be intentional with how you spend funds over a period of time. So you would not want to take and perform $20 million worth of highway improvements, and actually let's use 17, because 17 million was the number that Tim Ramberg suggested in his slides that Marathon County potentially consider for a target. If you spent $17 million but did that through utilizing all of the dollars, or 10 million of them to be ARPA dollars, based on the information we have right now, only 7 million, if it was entirely local revenue, or local funds, would qualify as GTA eligible expenditures. So it wouldn't necessarily have a negative impact, but we would very much need to be intentional about how we scheduled those projects over the life of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars.
But that's because this $10 million allocation would be encumbering $35 million worth of other projects on top of what was normally scheduled.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, certainly there's, the reason this is still a very good idea to have these funds available is because these are roadway, they're infrastructure needs you have. Marathon County has, as Jim referenced, to stay on top of your maintenance of a 612-mile asset that you have, the largest asset in terms of roadway miles within the state of Wisconsin by county, by a mile, pardon the pun. You need to make sure you perform a certain amount of work. And in this instance, if you are able to utilize ARPA dollars as the local match, as Jim referenced, to put in, let's use 20% as it's a frequent match requirement. You put in 20% of the funding and the state or the federal government provide you the other 80. That's a very good deal. If you were to offer me that deal, as Jim often says, I would stand in front of you with a bunch of dimes and very happily receive the dollar bills you would be handing me in exchange. So there's a very good rationale to do it. It's just that we would need to think through the scheduling to make sure, as you referenced, Supervisor Baker, we don't have a negative impact overall on the general transportation aid funding we project over that 6-year average and beyond.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, and last but not least is item 9B, 3F, and that is authorizing an expenditure of ARPA funds for NCHC addition and remodeling, Resolution 55-22. Supervisor Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a resolution to use the ARPA funds to fund the shortfall in the work that we've already obligated, and that we ran into significant cost overruns associated with the latest phase of construction at North Central Healthcare. It's work that we can't do, and it either goes on, we support it through the levy, or we do it through this process. And I think Supervisor Szafrinski had raised some questions about this at an earlier meeting, but this is an effort to try to deal with that shortfall because of the escalating costs associated with the supply chain, and we need these to make that facility work.
Okay, questions? Supervisor Marash?
So if this is approved, how much more will be asked for down the road, or is this it?
From what what they have told us, this should cover the last phase of the project renovation. So this will complete the full, almost now $80 million renovation down there. And so there should not be any additional overruns. This is what will be estimated to cover all of those. That's the best information we have today. Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Baker?
Just to clarify, though, there is also an additional request for operating expenses that will be coming?
That is
Is that
correct. That is correct. This is exclusively for the construction project and the remodel. This is the second to last phase of that remodel. Okay. Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. And I do understand, we've been through an environment where lots of unexpected costs have happened. With all due respect, my question is there a commitment by the responsible building, the people that are doing the contracting, is there a commitment that this $3,115,000 number is in fact what they're going to live to, and if it becomes $3,200,000, they eat the difference?
I'll let the administrator.
As Chair Gibbs referenced, and this is the best information that we have right now, that is for the second to last phase. We still have to, in any project, we'd have to bid out that last phase. We are looking at, and our facilities people will attempt to identify as much cost savings as we can, and one of the ways that we're looking at that, the last phase is going to be a lot of parking lots and landscaping and other kind of final touches on that facility. We're looking at how to do that as effectively, efficiently, and inexpensively as possible, and Jim's still sitting in the back, and he's very adept at paving, so we're going to be looking at that internal versus external cost as well. And I see Jamie's in the back, and she's very adept at landscaping. So we could have, we're looking at all of those things. The commitment I can make is we will do our best to do it as effectively as possible, but I cannot and will not promise you that the environment relative to labor is going to look substantially different when we get to that phase. We'll do our best.
But the major portion of the renovation of the building itself and the building envelope is contracted and has been bid. The section that has not is mostly parking lots. That's the last portion.
Okay, I understand. You've got something else after this, but what I was asking is, for the part that we're talking about, that would be a fixed cost, and we aren't going to be on the hook for, oops, now it's $3.5 million.
That's why it's $3,115,009.95, because it is already bid.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Okay, announcements and/or requests. I have one announcement from the clerk. If you're here or on Tuesday in person, please check your mailboxes. There is stuff in your mailboxes in the clerk's office. Supervisor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give out a shout out to my hometown of Athens. It is the 117th Athens World Fair. It started tonight. We missed 5-cent pitchers of beer at the beer tent, but there's plenty going on throughout the weekend, including a parade on Sunday at 1 p.m. And if you sit across from St. Anthony's Church, you'll get to hear former Supervisor Gary Beestrom announcing the parade. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him and Athens and invite everyone to the fair. Thank you.
Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be here at your Tuesday meeting, so if you have any questions or concerns, please direct them to me for the immediate future. But after that, Deputy Administrator Holman will be here to assist you in anything you may need. But if you do have questions, as always, reach out. Thank you.
Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to call your attention to page 47. Apparently, there's a little bit of a typo that would need to be corrected with the date.
Thank you. We'll have that corrected for Tuesday. Anything else? Any other announcements? Seeing Supervisor Robinson. Motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Rosenberg. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.